Where in your life do you close your heart? And what are you denying yourself in that process? So welcome everyone. Welcome to our Path of a Magdalena program for February. So the inquiry I just shared will be what we discussed today on our live discussion as we dive deeper into this quality of vulnerability in our Path of a Magdalena live event. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're so happy you're here. If it's not your first time, we're just as happy you're here too. Each month, we focus on a different quality of Mary Magdalena. And we have a clip that shares a little bit about the quality. We have different social media engagement, a meditation. If you all haven't listened to the meditation from this month on the English side, I would highly recommend it. I just listened to it. It's offered by Lisa. It was fantastic. And then we have this live event. So thank you for joining us. And we're doing our format a little differently. So what we're offering for last month, January, and this month, February, is what we call a satsang. And a satsang is literally translated to truth in conversation or sharing in truth or conversation in truth. It's really having a intimate, authentic conversation about a topic. So that's our intention here today. And so I have some different Magdalena practitioners with us here for our discussion today. So I'll offer each of them the opportunity to introduce themselves, where they're from. And if you want to, you could share something about yourself that the people may not know. So Dale, would you like to go first?
Excuse me. Sure. I'm Dale Capristo, and I live in upstate New York near Cooperstown. And something people may not know is I have two grandsons who live in Germany and two granddaughters who live about 40 minutes away. And they're the joy of my life. And where in my life do I tend to close my heart? Thinking about that, when I'm in a place where I'm supposed to be kind of in an intellectual or academic environment, and where I'm supposed to be using my mind, and I tend to then close off my heart in those situations and think I just have to come from my mind to be okay and to be acceptable. So I found that quite often when I was in an academic environment, and I still know when I go into those kind of spaces that happens again. It's hard to be vulnerable and share from my heart in those spaces where feelings are sometimes discounted.
Mm-hmm. Can anybody else relate to that? Boy, that's so true for me too, Dale. So much of my life has been in an academic world, and I can really relate. That's really a balance that I'm still trying to find too. Okay, Lisa.
So my name is Lisa Gyan, and I live on the west coast of Ireland. And I have a daughter who's 20. She's studying to be a midwife. Very proud of her, actually. She's a really good kid. And I've also got a little dog who's 10 years old, and he's a bit of a devil, but I love him too. And if what I'd share to open up about open-hearted and vulnerability is I've been really exploring this. Like, I do love what we do every month with equality. I just find it so beneficial to really look at this. And, I would have said that, like, I'm an open-hearted person because I do really aspire to be in my heart. It's something that's very important to me, and I do work on it. But, when I was really considering the quality of vulnerability, I was thinking, well, who do we consider to be vulnerable? It's like children and animals. And when I think of like my 2-year-old nephew who I was with recently in Florida, and like everything that he feels, all his emotions, you can read them all over his face, his expressions. Like he's not hiding anything. Everything as it is on the inside is how it's seen on the outside. And when I think of my dog as well, it's exactly the same. I never see him pretending not to be scared. Like I know when he's angry, I know when he's up to devilment, I know when he's chancing his arm. Like it's just so obvious. You can see it all. And when I look at me in my life, I realize there are definitely times when I come in my heart, but there's so many times when what I'm feeling inside is not visible. I'm in that whole protection thing, that part of me that filters everything and checks if it's safe to be really vulnerable. And there's many places that I'm not. So it's interesting for me to note that.
Lillian?
So, my name is Lilian Catalano. I live in France near Paris. I have a son and a beautiful granddaughter, 16 years old, and a number of cats who have adopted me. So they come and they stay. And so it's a whole family here in the jungle. And what I can say about vulnerability, I feel that I'm pretty comfortable with vulnerability, actually. And I feel that emotions are so beautiful, and we are, humans are people of emotion. And as Lisa was saying, when you see babies, they're just showing their emotion, animals. And myself, for instance, I'm sometimes a little too emotional regarding the suffering of people who are, vulnerable to, like children or animals. I'm rather unreasonable when it comes to saving animals or protecting them, or so I know this is one of my vulnerabilities, but I think I've played with this all my life. And I remember, now I'm retired, but I was a college professor. And, the students try to test you, asking questions. And actually, I just loved when I had to say, I don't know. I do not have the answer to your question, but I can find. I have books, I have ways to find the answer. I'll come back to you with the answer. And actually, they were a little shaken by my answer, but they loved it too, because it allowed them also to be vulnerable and recognize that they didn't know everything. But then, as things went on, I realized that I had my areas of comfort, my comfort zones in a way, guiding people, teaching people, having groups, and organizing for others. And so I realized that it could be good to find myself in areas where I am uncomfortable and vulnerable. And I started singing. Actually, the universe brought me the opportunity to sing, and I never sung in all my life. And I found myself in a group with musicians, people who can read music, and I have none of that. When I started singing, my voice was going everywhere. I had no idea if I was singing this voice or that voice. And I found myself, oh, this is so interesting to be in a place where I find myself, like when I was at school long time ago, and I'd not prepared, and I don't want the teacher to call me, so looking somewhere else, not to be the voice that was going to try to hold her space. And actually, I love the fact that I'm now in uncomfortable positions and doing my best and feeling the tensions inside, like a child, because I'm growing from that. So for me, vulnerability, I use it as an ally in a way to find the areas in me where I am still not so clear, not so comfortable, not so aligned. And I find this is necessary for me, not to find myself always in positions of guiding others, but in positions of being guided. And I feel that I'm growing from that. So I thank my vulnerability in that.
Oh, that's fantastic, Lilian. And for anyone who is watching us live, if you wish to put a few words in the chat, or even if you're not watching us live, would at any time, if you're watching, where in your life do you close your heart, and what are you denying yourself in that process? So that's the inquiry we're starting today and really living in the month to come. So my name's Cara. I live in Hawaii. I moved here about a year ago. And for something about me, so I'm a lawyer, and for my work, I oversee prison conditions and also promote reform for people who are incarcerated. So that's been my passion for almost a decade now. And so with that experience, and just overall in my life, vulnerability was never something I wanted. If there was like one quality that I could say I didn't want, it would be that. And because in the world that I grew up in, vulnerability was a huge weakness. It was the weakness. And that was probably what I spent most of my life avoiding, was being weak. So like no part of me was interested in vulnerability. Actually, when I signed up for the Magdalena program, yeah, I want the power, I want the fearlessness, like bring it on. Like vulnerability, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just skip over that one somehow. So anyway, it's not really possible to skip over it when you are in the Magdalena program, or when you really are working toward the Magdalena frequencies. So I would say that, I used to close my heart everywhere. And I find that less and less, and I find it lessening in every area of my life. With my partner, I think is probably the biggest area where I see it, where I am just diving more and more into vulnerability. And what I see in that is the opportunities in terms of like more harmony and more connection. And I see it there, and I just see it with people when I let them in. What's possible in terms of for them, but what's possible for me, like it's connection. And so that's a little brief description of my journey with vulnerability so far, which I will be honest is it's also not my strong suit yet. I don't know if it ever will be, but I'm grateful for my improvements, and I'm grateful for what's possible because of them.
I think it's a lifelong process of improvement, Cara. I feel that too. And I'm glad you brought up the idea of connection by being vulnerable, that it creates opportunities for connection. I think back to a time when I was at a diversity conference workshop, and we had an activity where you would choose a group and then work with a partner to give your first thoughts about that group. So it could be people who were Jewish, men, women, wealthy people. And my partner, I happen to choose Black. So what happens is your partner says Black or Negro, and you give your first response to that. And you do that several times to kind of go down through the layers. And I was really surprised about what came up, a very hurtful kind of term came up that I had heard when I was less than 5 years old from my friend's next door neighbor mom. And up the road from us then was a migrant camp, and she had many derogatory kinds of terms. So after you share with your partner, everybody comes back to the big group, and people give an opportunity to share what group they did and what came up. And then the organizers said, okay, did anybody do black? So I raised my hand and then had the opportunity to share. And when I got to those couple of terms that I was feeling hurt by the fact that they were still in me. And I did share them. And what ended up happening was it really gave the opportunity for other people to be vulnerable, but also there was a real connection because of the honesty of that and the vulnerability of sharing that. So it gave other people an opportunity to do that. So what seemed to be a real negative kind of thing in many ways, because it was honest and true and from the heart, turned out to be a way to connect with others.
Hmm. Oh, Lisa, I can't hear you.
Hey, I just realized I muted myself. And I'm listening to, and it's like, so, these things that we often feel shame about, isn't it? It's like the things that you want to hide, and the power, actually, it feels quite powerful when I hear you speaking about that, and just to take those things and have the vulnerability to bring them out into the open like that with people. And there's really a lot of healing in that, it feels like for everyone in your group. Um, it's so there's so much, well, so much can be healed, I suppose, through the open vulnerability of the heart, is what it feels like.
Yes,
I think that's a
I-
good way to put that, Lisa.
yeah.
A lot of healing is through.
Yes, I do resonate with what you said, your example, Dale, and what you say, Lisa. For me, actually, vulnerability is power. More than any, of these qualities, courage and fierceness, because daring to open is really something, then you're not afraid that people will see through your masks, because you took out the mask, took away the mask. So it's not always possible, and we need to respect ourselves in the rhythm, in the pace in which we are taking our masks away. But when it is done, it's so freeing. It's really freedom. And my freedom is just an opportunity for the other one to reach this freedom. You spoke of a connection, Cara, that it opened a new connection. And I feel it's opening, allowing the other to be in his or her truth also. The moment I'm in my truth, even if I'm shaken to show my truth and this aspect in me, what is in me, then it allows the other one to be in also his truth. And so for me, it's like a precious gem that you discover little by little, but you cannot just take like this and make your own. But it's little by little, according to the surrounding, with what kind of people can I fully open. And we are in a community, the community of Magdalenas. This is also the richness of it, because we can open our hearts and we can dare to show who we are.
I think that's an important point as well, Lilian, of like, there's the discernment, like for me, first of all, I practice being vulnerable with myself, being really sincere inside of myself and being with my emotion, being with everything as it arises. And actually, the more I go on, there's less emotion. There's just that really nice peace in my heart. And then, it's choosing the places where I allow myself to be vulnerable. And sometimes I'll even play with it, and I go, well, what will happen here? Because sometimes it's automatic for me to have my defenses and that's more automatic. I have to remember to like open up and be vulnerable and see what happens. And, for me, it's a bit like it's a muscle. The more I practice it, and the easier it becomes for me to do it. And like what you shared, Dale, about then bringing it out into places that are a little bit more risky, but the events that can happen from that are always really, great things happen in that space.
Mhm. When I was journaling last night about what is vulnerability, or how could I like what is the experience, and I can feel it now too. It's like my heart feels naked. It's like my heart is fully exposed, and there's no protection. There's no protection up. It's just my heart and me standing fully. It feels like I'm like center stage and my heart is just beaming. And it's kind of scary at the same time for me. I can still feel that even now, because for me there's an unknown in the vulnerability. It's an unknown of what will happen later. Like, yes, I know there's an openness, and yes, I know there's connection, and yes, I know there's potential, and yes, I know it can be scary for me. And yes, I know there may be a vulnerability hangover that's like ready to knock on my front door the next morning, and I'll think about what I said every moment, for a full 3 days. And I still choose it because of what's there. Like for me recently, where I really like to hide is when I'm having like intense moments. Like if I'm triggered in a situation, or I see something and it's reminiscent of something I didn't like in the past, what I like to do is hide. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to my room and I'm going to use my tools and I'm going to get myself out of this. And I'm not saying that's a bad strategy, because sometimes it is a good one. But what I've been trying lately is letting other people in those moments. And that's a really vulnerable place for me, because those heart naked, wide open moments. And actually one happened last week. I was really upset about something. And normally I just like go in my room and I close the door. And so I'm going in the room as fast as I can, like closing the door, and I hear a knock. Oh no, no. And my husband's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And then I pause. I was like, no, I'm not really. And then he opened the door and he came in. And he was so comforting to me in that moment. And I would have normally denied myself that experience. Like, oh, I can handle it. I can do it. I've got this. I've got the tools. Like, but there was something that was so comforting for me in just having someone else there for me in a moment where I actually would have preferred that no one would have seen me. So I think that's what I'm experiencing as what's possible from vulnerability. And it's still uncomfortable, if I'm being really honest. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even know. Should I have shared that now? Am I going to think about that tomorrow? Probably.
But isn't this like, the old way, like the masculine, like the courage and going out and, doing these really brave things? And isn't this like the divine feminine? This is the time where courage is doing that, is coming into our hearts and being, even though it definitely is scary, Cara, I totally agree with you. There's an exposure. For me, there's a thing of feeling exposed, which is uncomfortable. But like you said, it's that beauty. It's so worth it. But that's the courage, isn't it? It's the new courage, is to be in the tenderness and softness of the heart.
The,
Takes
the,
something.
the beauty of being who we are. And yes,
Mm,
it takes courage, and it takes some time also to
yeah. Yeah.
to walk this path. And
Yeah.
Mary Magdalena is really a beautiful example. And sometimes I feel that, I'm walking the path as if I'm in the steps of Mary Magdalena, and suddenly I walk differently. I'm more quiet, more aligned, more stable. And I feel all these qualities are little by little embodying me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, well, I want to thank I want to thank Lilian and Lisa and Dale for joining this conversation today. And we really invite you to continue this vulnerability experience throughout the month and the rest of your life. As you know, it's a journey. But thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to further discussing vulnerability on our social media throughout the month and just living the experience of it. Thank you.
Thank you.